Doo-doo-doo. I should take a page out of the Jay Dyer playbook and get like some kind of music stream with a countdown, or what's his Dyer wave that he does. I should get some Dyer wave to play over for 10 minutes before I actually show up in the live stream. Give myself a little break, time to do things like sort out why my mic won't work. All right, let's make sure these streams are looking good. Give me a comment if you're in the stream. Let me know how my audio sounds. I am obviously not in my old studio, as we do not live in that house anymore. So this is the first time that I've done a stream since I set up this new little studio in the Airbnb that we're staying in, and I'm hoping that everything works right. Let me check on Twitter. Yep, looks like we're live on Twitter, live on YouTube. All right, everyone says sounds good. Okay, cool. All right, I'll give it just another minute here to let anybody else wants to hop in the live stream, give them a chance, and then I will launch into it. I'm not expecting this to be as long as our typical stream. I've got a U.S. men's soccer game in an hour that I need that I want to watch. So let's see here. This works. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's a maybe at the end of the stream here, if I leave myself enough time, I'll give you guys a little catch up on what we've been up to, how things are going, where we're at, what we're doing, that sort of thing. If I leave myself time, I'll give you guys a little rundown on that. But I have some thoughts on these Canadian truckers, and I wanted to go live on this and talk about this a couple days ago, and just didn't wind up having the time. So I figured I would do it here while I've got a minute. Um, I think that I've seen some people that have said some of the sort of stuff that I'm going to say here. So I know that I'm not like bringing a completely original take, but I don't think it's going to be necessarily a popular thing. My thoughts on it, which I don't intentionally do this necessarily. I'm not like I find myself being the one who's trying to who's delivering the unpopular takes, and that's not necessarily by design. I don't think I'm necessarily trying to just bum people out or take the opposite position of as other people necessarily. I just um I suppose I have a hard time like making a big deal out of talking about stuff that everyone else is talking about. I feel like I don't really bring that unique of a perspective. So if it's something people are already talking about, I don't have really much to contribute. But the stuff that people aren't talking about is where I usually end up focusing, and that's where I feel like I might have some value. So um where is Steve? I don't know. I haven't talked to Steven in a little while. I didn't talk to him about. I was just going to go live and just do a quick thing here. This isn't even supposed to be like a legitimate episode. I was just gonna just shoot off my mouth for a minute. But I haven't talked to Steven in a while either. He's been busy with his different ventures he's got going on, and we just kind of had kind of agreed that we were going to be on hiatus here for a little bit while we are in this transition mode and getting ourselves into a new home eventually. So, Black Pill Matt Cooper says, maybe you would if you were in what's up, Malin? If you were in the Discord voice chat the other day when we were up until like 3 or 4 in the morning talking about it, you would have heard some of what I'm about to say. I kind of got into it a little bit then. Had a really interesting conversation with Jay from the Two Bit Podcast and Josiah. Um, Josiah Bartlett, he's in the chat here. Sudoku Polibiro on Twitter. And then Jeremiah was in there, and Malin was in there, and then Cable was there for a little while. There was a few different people that all showed up for it. We had a really good time. And that's definitely something. If you guys are interested in that, you can join our supporting listeners group. Go to subscribestar.com/kingpilled. That's something that I'm going to definitely do a lot more in the future. I'm going to do that Discord voice chat because it's fun. It's just like having like a group call with a bunch of buddies, and we had uh, just a absolutely profound conversation as we usually do. So, but yeah, if you guys had been in that voice chat, you would have heard some of what I'm already about to say. So for those of you who are in there, you've already heard a bit of my take on this. But I don't really hear people talking that much about some of this, and it seems like there's uh, a lot of wishful thinking around this situation going on in Canada with this trucker convoy and them taking over Ottawa and everything. And I'm very torn. I don't necessarily like the opinions that I have on it because I'm very sympathetic to them. I number one, just from a purely like being a reasonable person standpoint, but also because Canada has already had a really um, it's played a big role in my life. I went to high school in Canada and I lived there for about 4 years or so in my teens, and some of my best friends are Canadians that I've stayed in touch with ever since then. So I I have a very big soft spot for Canada as a country and for the Canadians. Some of the it's funny that Canada has this reputation for being like a bunch of weenies or a bunch of pushovers because some of the some of the hardest people that I know are Canadians. If you get north, I think it's like 90% of Canada's population lives within 100 miles of the US Canada border. So maybe that 90% are kind of squishy. But if you get outside that 90%, you get to the people north of 100 miles north of the border, you got some crazy mofos up there. They are absolutely savage, especially the truckers. A couple of my friends when I was in high school came from a family of truckers, and I have heard some absolutely insane stories of stuff that they would do, stuff they'd accomplished, and crazy adventures they had on snowy logging roads with logging trucks with brakes going out and that kind of thing. So Canadians are not soft people. They're not. They don't necessarily earn the reputation that they've been given, but they're also very nice people, which may be where they get the pushover thing. They tend to be very I don't know, kind, considerate, want to get along with other people, which I think are pretty good values to have. Um, but so they've finally been pushed to the breaking point lately, and I'm very sympathetic to that instinct. I'm very sympathetic to the position that they're in, and a few years ago, I would have been all aboard. I would have been like fully in support of what they're doing. And so here's the thing is I don't necessarily think they should stop doing what they're doing, but I want them to be successful. And for that reason, I can see a lot of what they're doing is just definitely not going to be successful. And in fact, it's going to be the exact opposite. They're going to ultimately be the pretext for greater escalations by the regime. And this is where I've really changed a lot in the way that I view the world over the last couple of years. Really, once I started thinking in terms of power dynamics and elite theory, I started seeing the world in a different way, and I started seeing these sorts of events in a different light. So there's a sort of thing that, yeah, that's a really good. That's you could put this entire thing just about into two words. That'd be Canada Charlottesville. That's really what they're setting themselves up for. But I wanted to run through um, kind of the specifics of this and kind of think through because I did a debate. I'm not going to say with who. Those of you who know, you know, but I'm not. I'm avoiding saying specific people's names for a lot of reasons. I did a debate a few months back, and one of the key questions that I had in that debate that was never answered and still has not been answered to this day is what now or what then? Whether you're talking about specifically right now or you're dealing in hypotheticals, what then? So we're going to do. I see a lot of people say, "Well, we need to do this, 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 and this. We need to do these things that tend to revolve around rallying support for a cause, persuading people, waking people up, something to that extent." They say we need to do this, as if it's self-evident that once we've done that, then the problem will solve itself. But these problems don't solve themselves, and and somehow waking people up to something, creating a bunch of hullabaloo around your pet issue doesn't always necessarily lead to the desired outcome. But I don't hear a lot of people when they approach these kinds of situations, I don't hear a lot of people asking themselves that question or thinking about things in that way. It's kind of just get a whole bunch of emotional energy around something, and then someone's going to swoop in and solve it and save the day. And I think that there's a reason for this. I think there's a number of reasons for this, but one in particular, the real real heart, or real core of this issue is that Americans today, really anybody who's been steeped in the West, which is really to this point a vast majority of the population of the world, but particularly people in America and its colonies like Canada and Europe, and South America to some degree, Central America. We've all been steeped in the revolutionary tradition. We've all been enculturated to instinctively admire and support revolutionary movements that are any sort of uprising of the underdog, any sort of big um uh, like channeling of energy from the plebs or the lower class or the anybody who's seen as being without power, any sort of channeling of that energy into some kind of a movement, we are naturally instinctively um, drawn to like and respect and support and endorse that in all of our literature, our movies, our music. There's always this theme running through it that has to do with the ideal nature or the desirability of revolution and progress and upsetting the natural order to bring about a new and better world. This sort of sentiment is like baked into us at a genetic level. And we've all watched all the movies, the TV shows, read the books where uh y- it might be like the background of the American Revolution uh or even like civil rights era or just kind of like name an era. The focus will always be on all of the evangelizing and the fervor and the build up to a sort of event. And that is like the iconic event that everything turned on. And from then there was change and everything just kind of fixed itself. But there's never really a focus on what actually was done to fix the thing, what actually changed and how that change came about. There's kind of this breakdown where it's like that meme where you have 1, 2, and 3, and 1 is do this thing, 2 is question marks, and 3 is profit. It's like that's in everybody's mind. It's just do this thing and then we'll profit. So in this case, to make it topical, these truckers have organized a convoy and they have um in a sense they've laid siege to the capital city. They've taken it over. They've occupied it. And then there's this kind of an assumption latent in people's thinking that, well, eventually the government's going to have to address them. They're going to have to come to the table and negotiate, and somehow we're going to come out ahead because there's so much popular support behind these truckers and because they're so determined and they fit all of the admirable archetypes from Western literature of the underdog who's been oppressed for so long that they've finally decided to step up and overthrow their oppressors. So people are really caught up in the romance of this. They're caught up in the romance of the idea of the blue collar laborer who rallies together with his countrymen and they storm the Capitol and they throw out the old government and they institute a new one. And then like this is the day, this is the turning point where the nation, then it was a different nation going forward. But there there's not a clear path from where they are right now to that sort of an outcome. And I wanted to try to think through this out loud. I wanted to think through uh, the way that what would have to happen to arrive at that sort of an outcome where like the existing government is overthrown. Somehow the existing regime is overthrown and the new people are brought in. They create a new government and what is it like write a new constitution, establish like whatever the plan is. Let's kind of think through how that might happen. So first of all, I don't think that anybody would necessarily consider it a success if all that they accomplished with all of this was talking the existing government, by that I mean the existing elected officials. I don't think that anybody would consider a success if what they got out of this was the existing officials said, okay, we're going to raise all of the restrictions and there's not going to be any mandatory vaccinations and there's not going to be any more lockdowns. Like that wouldn't nobody would buy that. Nobody would see that as like, oh, okay, yeah, these guys are obviously going to be good to their word. So there we go. We got concessions and we're going to head back home and go back to our lives and just trust that these people know that we mean business now. No, that's not going to fly. Because once you get some kind of concession and you go home, you're not going to rally this kind of support again for a long time. It's going to take a lot to get people to put their lives on the line. I don't mean like actually risking death because I don't think it's necessarily that serious. I mean put everything else in their life on hold and focus an indefinite amount of time and money and energy on going and occupying the capital city. You're not going to get people to just, you're not going to like go home and then 2 weeks from now there's a new lockdown mandate. Oh no, we got to get everybody together again. We got to go back and start over again. Obviously, you don't want that. Obviously, that's not a win. So it has to be something more than that. And you could go through different things like, well, we're going to demand a new Bill of Rights. We're going to demand a some sort of new law that outlaws these kinds of things. We're going to, something like that. We're going to demand that the prime minister be thrown out and a new prime minister hold a new vote. Something like that. All of these ideas or these suggestions all fall within trying to make legal changes within the existing corpus of law, retaining the same government in spirit and exercising our voices within the existing government to try to make legal changes that suit our ends. Like all these different options that I see people discussing or that are kind of like the natural things people might think about, they all fall within that sphere. And here's the problem with that. And I'm going to try to get through this without Fed posting because that's not my intent. My intent isn't to encourage people to do anything. That's not the reason I'm doing this stream isn't because I'm trying to get people to stop doing what they're currently doing and go do something else. I don't have any call to action with this stream. This is just think through the issues and try to grapple with the world as it is. So if these operating within the constraint of the existing corpus of law, within the existing government, if these truckers were able to get a concession like Justin Trudeau steps down, like that would be a pretty significant concession. Like we forced the prime minister into resigning. A lot of people would see that as a major win. Like the people voiced their will and forced the guy who didn't represent the rest of the country to step down. But who's going to replace him? And here's the problem. If whoever you get to replace him, it won't matter. This is the nature of this type of regime. This is the nature of these evolved, democratic, modern Western states. These proto-technocratic Western states. They aren't the governments of the 17 and 1800s where you have like a head of state, and if you throw him off the throne, then everything just kind of goes into chaos until some new guy comes into place, and then everybody will rally behind that new guy. This is part of the nature of the cathedral, is that it's so completely decentralized It has no actual functional head. So Trudeau is like Biden. Trudeau is a figurehead. He's a performer. He's an actor, a salesman whose responsibility is to go on stage, make a performance, and give direction to the performers. He doesn't actually hold power in and of himself. So if you get him to resign, in fact, this is what I would do. If I was the one of the financiers, one of the people who actually hold the power here, and these truckers were coming, the best thing to do would be to meet them on even ground and say, "You're right. This whole thing got out of hand. Let's make some concessions. You want Trudeau out? Cool. Trudeau, hit the road. Who do you want? We're going to have put some new person in, install him as prime minister, create these new bits of legislation." It would be like entirely within their interests to try to solve the problem that way within this existing structure of the state. So all you're doing is just kind of like tweaking some spreadsheet columns and moving some documents around. That'd be the best case scenario for them, because the truckers are going to feel like, hey, we got a bunch of concessions and they changed all this stuff. And maybe even we have one of our figureheads who we're going to install as prime minister, and he's going to be here to oversee everything. You could go as far as like installing an entire new parliament according to the will of the truckers. And it still wouldn't be enough. Because as soon as they turn around and go home, the entire system is going to immediately treat all of these new people, all this new legislation, all of this new work that has been done. They're going to treat it like a virus. The immune system is going to kick into gear, and the entire decentralized apparatus is going to start networking around these now corrupt nodes. So any sort of solution that's within the context of like, oh, we're gonna like overthrow the prime minister, we're gonna abolish parliament, we're gonna like those kinds of things, or not abolish parliament, but replace members of parliament. Any of those sorts of things are not actually going to be a win ultimately. This is what I'm really wanting to try to drive at here is the insidious nature of this type of regime. You can't just lop some heads off like Hydra. You can't just lop some heads off and think that you've won the battle, think that you've won the war. A lot of people, as soon as the truckers arrived in Ottawa and set up, they set up camp there, and kind of everyone was like, "All right, well now what?" I saw a lot of people who were saying, "Install a new government, like declare the old government null and void, kick them all out, install a new government." Now, and here's where I'm going to avoid Fed posting. I would have a different sort of opinion about that than some of what I've expressed earlier in this stream here. But my opinions on it are really neither here nor there. I'll just put it that way. But let's run with this idea. Okay, so let's say they do this. They're going to install a new government. They're going to throw out all the old guys, tear up the old bill of the Charter of Rights and all the stuff that they tear it all up, install an entirely new government going forward. I don't know if people truly understand just what that would entail, because the source of power within the existing system is not within the congressmen or the members of parliament and the prime minister. Those aren't the actual sources of power. Those are the figureheads of power. Those are the levers of power. But the actual power is far beneath them. This is one thing that I said in the Discord the other day, that there's this kind of old idea that's still latent within us that if you're occupying the city, you're controlling the centers of power within that city. But in a digital age, in a an age of a complete globalization of technology and digital communication and everything, there's no like if the people within the city, the actual power brokers within the city are held there, the ones outside the city are still going to run the show. So if you like take these people captive or something like that, you're not actually controlling the centers of power. You're just controlling the pawns. The people who actually are the power brokers, the people who you're actually wanting to deal with, the ones you really need to mess with, they are like far removed from the city. Most people wouldn't even know their names. They wouldn't even recognize them. Those are the actual people who hold the power, the ones you're trying to get to change, trying to get to do something. But what leverage do you have on them? So here's the thing. If you're to go and install a whole brand new government altogether, how are you going to keep it? How are you going to hold it and sustain it? How are you going to when none of the media is going to be on your side, none of academia is going to be on your side. The majority of the population is probably not going to be on your side, or at least the ones who are the most influential. The influential members of the population are most likely mostly not going to be on your side. And then you're going to have all the different like parliamentary or all the different provincial governments who the majority of them aren't going to be on your side. Like to actually sustain that level of change would require an absolutely immense amount of organization and funding. That's the biggest thing, funding. This is why all of these major social changes always turn on the wealthiest people in the room. If you want to have a political movement, if you want to have a political party, or you're wanting to achieve some kind of a political change, nothing that you do is going to matter until you have big money backing you. The people with the money decide which political movements rise and fall. They decide the success of the political movements. And this should be pretty obvious. You can just think about this. If you were to try to, like, if you wanted to do create a new political party, and you wanted it to accomplish anything, you wanted to achieve any level of notoriety, you're going to need funding. That's going to be one of the first things that you look for. You're going to look for somebody who will pay for you to travel around the country, to for all the needed like paperwork and bureaucracy and all of that. You're going to need somebody who's going to fund all of that, fund all of your marketing, all that kind of thing, fund the salaries of the employees, whatever. It all is going to hinge on the money. The people with the money ultimately control the show. So what's happening right now in Ottawa is they aren't actually going after the seat of power. They're going after the thing that's pretending to be the seat of power. That doesn't mean that they can't be influential. That doesn't mean that they, in a positive sense, because they're definitely going to be influential, all right. That doesn't mean they can't be influential in a positive sense, but it means that strategically, they're showing their hand without actually combating or without actually confronting the actual power in the room. And the best that they can hope for is to create a hostage situation, essentially, where they're going to hold the city, they're going to hold parliament hostage and attempt to extract demands. But in order to sustain those demands, in order to actually, or to sustain demands that would make a difference, that would make the whole thing worth it, they're going to need networks of power and wealth and influence and firepower that they just don't have, that really don't exist on the right wing at all today. There is no major coordinated, organized right wing effort to sustain that level of regime change anywhere in the world. We're trending in a direction where within years or decades, perhaps that might become a realistic option, but it's not right now. So I think that a lot of people, as they look at this, as they kind of think about this, because this is the way that I've thought about it. I've studied my own thinking on this and realized some of the like the latent assumptions in this, and then I see other people talk about it in the same way, and I can see the same assumptions with other people. They still think about the majority of us still imagine that we live in a world of like 100 years ago where power centers lie relatively close to us. I don't mean necessarily close geographically, but close in terms of ranks of power. And that all it takes to ascend the rungs of power up to the level where you can really make a permanent difference, all it takes is just accumulating a big rush of energy, and you can basically go storm the castle gates, knock him down, grab the king, drag him out of his throne, and toss him out in the gutter and install a new king, and the rest of the society is just going to be like, okay, I guess this guy's the king now. That's kind of what's latent in the whole like take over the LP, all the anybody who's talking about any kind of political movement seriously in the country today seems to have that latent idea in their head that this is just a matter of get enough people involved, get enough energy, get a loud enough voice, and all we have to do is shift some people around and voila. It's just like when they wrote the Constitution. But that just doesn't exist today. That just doesn't that's not how the world is structured today. These power centers are so decentralized and so baked into the society, and the actual power brokers themselves have put so many layers of bureaucracy and just barriers between them and people who could actually remove them from their position of power, that the only way that any sort of major um significant lasting change is ever going to happen is if people start playing the long game and begin treating the system as it actually is, not as we kind of imagine it is based on the media, what the media describes to us. Because there's this distinct phenomenon within like dissident circles where people will see themselves as completely like red pilled on the nature of the regime and red pilled on power and all this kind of thing. But you can tell that still very latently, they haven't grappled with the reality that the news that is presented to them is a crafted fake picture of the world. They still will have the latent assumptions about the nature of the world that the news presents, even when they realize that the news is fake. That's what's the um there's like a specific name for this when it's the thing where when you read the newspaper and you'll look at something and you'll read something that's in an industry you're familiar with and you're like, "Pff, that's totally like what sort of moron wrote this? He has no idea what he's talking about." It's insane that they'll just like they'll let anybody write anything in here these days. And you'll turn the page and you'll read something in a different industry that you're not familiar with and you'll take it at face value. There's a specific name for that. It's like a specific like a syndrome or something. I can't remember the name of it. Someone in the chat might throw it out there. Um, but the even to people that will be like they'll look at it and be like, yeah, this is fake, this is fake, this is fake, this is fake. They'll still buy like the premise of the fake news. They'll still buy the um the like the idea that the president holds power. This is why so many people get so bent out of shape. Well, Trump could have done this, this, and this, and he didn't do that. And like people will be completely like hip to the cathedral, recognize like the nature of what's called the cathedral, and they'll recognize that this entire system is all completely corrupt and bought off and everything. And then they'll be mad that like Trump didn't bring all of the troops home, or that Trump didn't end the drug war, or some stupid thing like that. Like, how do you understand the nature of this system, but then you still buy into these ideas that the president is like a figurehead of immense power who could just unilaterally do these things? Yeah, Gell-Mann amnesia. That's what it is. Gell-Mann amnesia. Gell-Mann amnesia. Um, that's the phenomenon I'm talking about, where people will completely recognize one aspect of the news as total bullshit, and then they'll turn the page and be like, "Oh, this is just kind of just take it at face value." What you have to realize is that not only is every single bit of the news fake news, but the world that that news is assuming doesn't exist. That world is fake. So the idea that you're just going to go into a city like this and stir up a bunch of shit and piss everybody off and get the government to bend the knee to you, which I think all of those things are going to happen. And I think all of those things are not necessarily bad things. But the idea that all of that is then going to lead to some type of significant systemic institutional change is not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. But it gets worse than that, because it's not that their demands are unrealistic. It's not that their expectations are unrealistic. I think those things are true, that they are unrealistic. Even if I sympathize with them, even if I wish they were going to be successful, even if I want them to be successful, it's not just that they're unrealistic. It's that they are setting themselves up now, as the guy said earlier in here, Canada, Charlottesville. They are now perfectly positioning themselves to become the fall guys for the next regime escalation. And this should be very this should be very evident to you if you think really like reasonably about what you would do if you were in the position of the media, the government, any of these positions of influence and power. The narrative is very straightforward from here. It's, what's that? All your shelves are empty? Well, yeah, look at all the truckers. The truckers are all having a party in the middle of the city, keeping everybody up at night. Of course, your shelves are empty. And that's going to be the easiest narrative in the world for everybody to believe. They'll very naturally believe that because everybody wants a scapegoat. And it's much easier to see, to point out a really obvious scapegoat like that than to try to convince people of some kind of big orchestrated conspiracy with these elected officials to try to break people out of that mind control that they're under because of the nature of the media, the mind control device of the media. Breaking people out of that is much harder than saying, see these guys who've been honking and like pissing you all off and everything. They're the guys who are responsible for you starving because they're the ones who bring the food and they're not bringing the food. So you're going to get public outrage. I saw a comment here that says the point of the trucker protest isn't to change leadership of Canada's government. They understand that will never happen. The point is to create public outrage. Right. Then what? Public outrage to do what? Toward what end? Just generating public outrage, you're going to get public outrage, but there's a massive mind control device that exists to take public outrage and channel it at specific victims. And what these truckers are doing is they're volunteering to be the victims. They're volunteering to be the targets of that public outrage. It's gonna come eventually. If you're thinking about this in terms of like absolute numbers, in terms of like, well, we just need to get 52% of the population on the side of the truckers. That's again, that's not how the world works. The world doesn't work in terms of majorities. The world always turns, human societies always turn on small, tightly organized minorities who don't give a fuck, who are hell-bent on getting the outcome that they want, and who have no self-awareness. Those are the people that turn the society. The society always begins, like, if you think of, like, again, the analogy with like a network and going around nodes, the node that clearly isn't going to go anywhere, the society will build around it. So what the truckers are doing here is they're trying to use a playbook that doesn't yield the ends that they actually want. This is the nature of the revolutionary traditions. They're all rooted in the same notion, and this is where you introduce archetropism here from Popular Liberty. This is the way that these systems always tend. They're always going to tend more and more chaotic. And what the truckers are doing right now is they're introducing chaos. They're introducing chaos into a system which will become the pretext for cries for the imposition of order. So now there's a justification for an escalation by the regime. Now they can crack down because now they have what seems like a very normal or a very reasonable pretext, like moral justification for framing these guys as criminals and and escalating, going even further, cracking down even more. And I can hear in my mind, I can hear the well, if they escalate, then we'll escalate. Okay, then what? This is a question you have to keep asking yourself. Then what? There's this emotionality at the heart of the revolutionary traditions that's like just ugh, just do this thing. Just do it. Just do it. And in the movies, it always works out. The people just do it. They just follow their heart and they just do it. And then at the end of the movie, it always works out for them. So just do it and it'll work out for us. It's not going to work out that way. The truckers are going to become the scapegoats for supply lines breaking down. And this isn't going to just be restricted to Canada. You've immediately got just like the tailor-made narrative. It doesn't have to be true. They just have to say it. That because of the supply lines breaking down in Canada, it's created a ripple effect through the rest of the economy, and that's why there's supply lines in, in Sri Lanka. That's why there are supply lines breaking down in Sri Lanka. That's why there's supply lines breaking down everywhere. It's very easy to paint a story. Again, doesn't have to be true. If you're fighting about whether or not it's true, you've lost. Doesn't have to be true. It's very easy to paint a story that a sufficient number of people will believe that because of what the truckers are doing in Canada, everything else is breaking down. So I'm seeing now this idea that they're going to do a trucker convoy in the U.S. from California to D.C. or something like that. I should have pulled it up before I went live here. I tweeted something a few weeks back. I think I quote tweeted something that Josiah said. What was it? It was that trucker strikes are so ill-advised, strategically speaking, that the only thing I can accept going forward is that anybody seriously advocating trucker strikes is a Fed. Because it's unless you're prepared and capable of occupying the entire jurisdiction that you're focused on. And by occupying, I mean like sustaining that occupation going forward, abolishing the old system of government and sustaining a new occupation with a new system of government going forward. Unless you're prepared to do that, then laying siege to your own cities is not going to work out the way you think it will. I understand the impulse. I want to have that happen. I want that to be something that works out. I want it to be that easy. But all it's doing is just setting up the quote unquote good guys to be the fall guys. Cooper said, "Nah, they'll let Trudeau be the fall guy and just cycle in a new interchangeable elite." See, this is what I would do if I was them. Trudeau's a schmuck. Just like everybody hates him. So the way to really win this, the way to be really Machiavellian about this, is to make concessions to the truckers. Use this as an opportunity to throw out somebody old and pick somebody new. Pick somebody who wouldn't ever think that they'd ever be in that position. Someone who ostensibly opposes you, but you target him, you pull him up and you say, you know what? We're going to make you the guy. You're going to be the man. You're going to be the new prime minister. We're going to empower you in that position because we think it's time for a change. We think it's time to move into the new world. We're going to bring you out. We're going to make you our new guy, and you're going to owe us. And give the appearance to everybody else that, like, everything's, yeah, that's right. We bent the knee. We realized that the Trudeau and these politicians just don't have our interests at heart. They're just they're only in it for their own corruption so yeah, we're tossing them out. We're getting rid of them, and we're gonna move forward. We're gonna break bread. We're gonna make these changes legally. We're not gonna do anything crazy. We're not gonna be overthrowing governments or anything like that. We're just gonna remove a corrupt prime minister. We're gonna do these legally, all within the bounds of the existing law, and we're gonna shake hands. And you guys can go back home knowing that you did your duty. And like that would be the way to do it, because then they're all like, yeah, great. We got all our concessions. We ousted all these corrupt politicians, and we got our desires on the record. And now we can go back home. We don't have to actually like put ourselves at risk of being arrested or put in prison or killed or anything like that. That's the way to do it. Like that's the way to work this in a Machiavellian sense. I'm surprised that they haven't done something like that already. It may be like, I don't know if maybe they don't have the spokespeople to do it right. I don't know. Like, I don't know why they haven't done that. It could be that the regime is going to let their incompetence win out here. But how would you put this? The regime has so much ground that they can give and still come out ahead. And the truckers and the interests they represent have to take so much ground before they can actually have a win. And anything less than that is catastrophic. So it's going to take some serious will. It'll take serious will. But the way that I see it right now, unless there's some sort of a massive underground organization that's been built up and funded and managed to be completely off the radar, there is, even if the truckers have the will, there isn't the infrastructure, whether like literal, physical, or social infrastructure, to actually institutionalize that willpower in the form of a new government that is controlled by something other than the regime, because this regime is ultimately global. So even if you throw out the Canadian government, the Canadian government is really just they're like a colonial protectorate of the United States. And the United States is really just kind of like, the United States politicians are really just like a colonial protectorate of the UN. So, even if you throw out the existing government, you're not actually, there's still like layers of bureaucratic institutional nonsense for like infinitely above you, infinite floors above you, that you're just going to answer to them. This is what, like, you see every time you get someone that like talks a real big game and then they get into power and they're like super, what's the meme of the Sheba that's like the sheep that's like the big buff guy, and then the one that's like really wimpy. Like that's people, like every politician is, as he's in campaigning versus in power. It's because of the nature of this system. So the same thing is going to hold true here. Mark says the truckers don't have enough public support to trigger a regime change. Yeah, I think they have a lot of public support. I don't want to underestimate their or understate their public support, but they don't have the public support to sustain a regime change like that. And the nature of the global government, the global government system, whether it's the UN, NATO, IMF, all of these global institutions, World Economic Forum, Davos, all these are the people who actually own the governments. And it's very easy, if it's inconvenient for them to have to sidestep around some rogue government that gets taken over by revolutionaries, but you're not going to take the whole system down. You're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. So maybe this is black pill Matt. I don't know. Like to me, I'm just like they don't they, they don't have an ideological bent against me existing. They have an ideological bent against me being in their way. So if I'm not getting in their way, then I can make for myself a pretty good life. So can the rest of us. And if we're ever going to make a dent in this system, if we're ever going to try to move toward a privatized society or whatever utopian goal someone has, if we're ever going to make a better world, it's going to take a long game as it is. It's going to take people taking control of their own lives, building up their own wealth and control of their own neighborhoods, their own regions, and creating the what would you say, like creating the superstructure, the institutional superstructure upon which a new and better system of government can be installed. But you're not just going to go in and get the easy win where you just go in and you just like flip some tables over and bully the existing government into changing its tune and then everyone lives happily ever after. That just doesn't that there's no such thing. And if it was just that, like if it was just yeah, they're not going to accomplish what they think they are, then that I probably wouldn't say anything. But the fact that it's going to be like it's actually going to work against them, they're going to become the fall guys. They're going to become the pretext for much worse abuses of power, whether it's by Trudeau or whoever is installed after him. That's why I feel more inclined to say something, to speak up and try to get more people thinking along these lines. I don't think I'm going to like stop the obviously I'm not going to like stop the convoy or anything. And I think that there's definitely positive aspects to it. I think that it's gotten the attention of a lot of people that otherwise might not have taken it seriously. But the thing with those people is that the goal now shouldn't be get them rallied into our movement and get them to come join our army and get ready to storm the gates. The goal should be number one, building yourself a company, a neighborhood, a local culture, and then reaching out to those people and trying to make them into allies for the long run. The revolutionary movement has imbued all of us with this sort of latent high time preference instinct where we can we feel like at any point, I mean, look what the founding fathers did when they got fed up. They just fought a war and told the British to piss off, and they installed a new government. We can just do that whenever. And so then people are like, oh, we've had enough. People are waking up. We need to wake people up and get them to join our cause. We're going to win this election. We need to start winning elections if we want to take back this country. If you're thinking in those terms, you're not taking back anything. You're being used as a pawn to perpetuate things. And really, you're being used as a foil. I think that's the biggest thing that I would tell well-meaning regime dissidents. Don't be used as a foil. Don't put yourself in a position where you become the pretext for the next regime escalation. That's something that the particularly the American right wing, is very, very good at. They're very good at um, to use a term, they're very good at stepping on their own dicks, and that I think that needs to change. I think if we want to start carving ourselves out a little bit of sanity in this insane world, then we have to start being realistic and reasonable about the world that's around us, and not getting suckered into revolutionary propaganda and induced into activity masquerading as achievement. So that was that was basically all the thoughts that I had. Um, we've got a fun we got a fun guy here in the chat. Um, you're new here. All right. Well, looks like the game is starting right now, so I think I'm going to bid you guys adieu. We should. I need to reach out to Steven and figure out when we can get the show on the road again. I've still got a lot of work that I have to do, getting some new income streams set up here, and um, so I don't know that we're going to be uh, ready to pick up where we left off and get on our new schedule quite yet. But I've got some interesting guests that I'm going to be getting lined up here in the next couple of weeks, and starting to have some interesting conversations. So appreciate you guys. You can follow me on Twitter at Real King Pilled. You can join our supporting listeners group on Subscribestar. You can join our private Discord, where there's a little bit of everything in there. It's some of the best people, some of the best guys I've ever seen that are just some of the smartest and most well educated. There was a big diet and fitness and nutrition thread that was going on in there today. We have a channel for theological debates, and we've got Catholics in there. We got Orthodox. We got some dirty Protestants. We got a little something for everybody in there. So if you'd like to join that Discord, we'd love to have you. We have a great time. You can just go to subscribestar.com/kingpilled. And if you sign up at any of the levels there, then you'll get automatically added to the Discord server. And then, oh yeah, Cooper says he still needs to argue with me. We need to argue about simulation theory. I think we actually agree more than Cooper thinks we do, but maybe we'll wind up having that as a bonus episode or something. Anyways, appreciate you guys listening. We'll